Welcome to Quarantine Chats, episode 53. I'm joined here by Jonathan Mathis from the Stables Network, my co-host Isaiah Young, and a very special guest, Benjamin Albright. He is a Broncos reporter and analyst for KOA Radio. How you doing today, Ben?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you guys?
Doing good. You know, it's getting hot during the summer months, but glad to have baseball back. Looking forward to football coming back.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to have sports back, and it'd be nice to have my favorite sport back in football, but it's nice enough to have the tide me overs with baseball and basketball right now.
Yeah, so I'll give you a chance to kind of market yourself and your content. So what are you doing out there in Denver right now?
I have a nighttime sports talk show on KOA, and then I'm the KOA NFL Insider. I do game day broadcasts for the Broncos, sideline reporting as well. So kind of a jack of all trades, master of none of them. But, you know, it's a lot of fun. I get to talk about football for a living, you know, and I think that's living the dream. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, being paid to talk about sports, I don't think any of us here would say no to that.
Wow, fair.
You got a favorite Broncos player so far?
Well, I was really excited about Drew Lock before they drafted him. I was up at the Senior Bowl in Mobile down there talking to him and everything. And I got a chance to chat with him for about 15, 20 minutes. And man, I was just blown away. Like he's one of those guys that's that has this hyper obsessive want to learn and want to be better at football, you know. And I haven't really seen somebody with that kind of attitude since Peyton Manning around here. And
Right.
you know, you don't want to invoke that name, but I mean, it's kind of that same mentality, and it's a refreshing change from the quarterbacks around here who've kind of mailed it in over the last couple of years. Guys like Joe Flacco who are just cashing a final check. Case Keenum, who was woefully out of his depth as a starter. Trevor Siemian, the former 7th round pick, and Paxton Lynch, who just wanted to play video games and had no clue. So it really is refreshing. And so I was super excited when the Broncos drafted him. And now there's a whole running bit on my show where we talk about we're going to build a half Drew Lock, half horse statue right out in front of the stadium. And so that's become a running bit on my show.
Yeah, Isaiah is going to love you, Ben, because this guy is the biggest Drew Lock fan. I mean, Keaton Slovis, Devin Booker, Drew Lock, those are his guys. So to put him in that kind of Manning mentality, hey, that shows what you think about, you know, kind of his future in Denver.
Yeah, I was when he got a chance to start last year, I was pretty excited about it. I know there were a lot of people that thought that he was going to flame out and be a bust and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, man, I think you guys are writing this guy off too soon. And, you know, he came out there and kind of blew the doors off. So we're excited to see what he can do in year 2.
And look at how far he's come. All right, so we're going to get into a lot of talk about the Broncos today, some general NFL talk as well. We're going to talk about Drew Lock, if he's the franchise guy, some of the Broncos offseason moves, and the head coaching situation down there in Denver. So without further ado, I'm going to leave it to my guy Isaiah to ask the first question today.
All right, thank you, Steven. Ben, before I get into the questions about the Broncos, I got to ask you, so how do you think the Denver Nuggets are going to do as the NBA restarts? Do you think the Denver Nuggets will take down my Los Angeles Lakers in the playoffs?
Man, that's going to be tough. They were going off as a long shot. I put a little action on it, but I don't know how safe that money is. I probably just spent money that I'm not going to see back. But it's interesting. They've got some interesting pieces, and you know, having that tall ball lineup that they went with the other night was really fun to watch, with Jokic at the point guard and Bol as the small forward. It was pretty fun to watch. So they've got a lot of pieces. They get hot at the right time. It's possible. I wouldn't say it's probable, but I would say it's possible that you could find them there in contention at the end.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think Denver, the Nuggets are a team to watch, but let's go to the Broncos. So, you know, the Broncos this offseason, I believe they had one of the best off seasons out of any NFL team. They addressed the offense by getting Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler to bolster their wide receiving corps. And then they went out and got Melvin Gordon to help bolster their running back corps. And then they got Graham Glasgow to help protect Drew Lock. And then on defense, they went out and traded for Jarrell Casey in an absolute robbery from the Tennessee Titans to help bolster that defensive line. And then John Elway and Vic Fangio went out after that and got AJ Boye to help replace Chris Harris Jr. With all the moves that the Broncos have made this offseason, do you believe that the Denver Broncos have a legit shot of dethroning the Chiefs and winning the AFC West this season?
That's a really tough ask. I think that they can make the playoffs. I think that they've got a better than expected football team. They finished second in the AFC West last year. Nobody seems to remember that. They started off the season really struggling. The whole season was a struggle offensively until Drew Lock got in there, but they struggled defensively, learning Vic Fangio's scheme and philosophy. It took them a little while to get it. But when they did, they came on, and they were a team that finished number 1 in the NFL in red zone defense, number 10 in the NFL in total defense. So, the Broncos defense is still pretty good. The question is, can they score points? And, last year they were averaging 16, 17 points a game. That's not getting it done. So, if they can add a touchdown to that and put themselves in contention, that flips 3 or 4 games a year in terms of, the overall score. They go 7-9 last year. Well, that puts them in contention for 10, 11 games. I don't know that dethrones Kansas City. I think Kansas City is one of the premier teams in football, but it puts them squarely in the seat for a wild card. And if Kansas City has an injury or slips a little bit, it would put them within striking distance. I think if you're the Broncos, your goal this year is not to dethrone Kansas City. It's to actually beat Kansas City for the first time in a few years. And then, try to make the playoffs and go from there. Continue to build on the foundation you started last year.
Yeah, great points, Ben. The reason why I was asking you about that Kansas City and the Broncos question is because for me, I think, the Broncos last year, they got unlucky several times, especially early on in the season. I thought they should have won at least 10 games. There were calls that went against them that I thought was super terrible calls. But the Broncos definitely have they have definitely gotten better in terms of talent wise. Let's move on to Vic Fangio. What were some things that you liked from Vic Fangio's first season as head coach? And what are some things that you believe that Coach Fangio needs to improve on as he enters his second year as the head coach of the Broncos?
Well, things I liked as a media member, it made me started going to press conferences again. I kind of quit going just because there's nothing of value to get at most of those things. They give you the same pablum answers. John Fox was a master of standing there and saying nothing for hours. Gary Kubiak, same thing. And Vance Joseph, those were just bad. He would just sit there and talk about having a great week of practice over and over. And it was silly. So I got to the point where I didn't even go anymore. And Vic Fangio is refreshingly honest at those things. Like he will give you actual answers. So that part of it from the media side of the house has been really cool. In terms of him as a coach, it took a while for people to understand what it was that he's trying to do. So the Broncos over the last 8 years or so had been a man-heavy defense that was kind of running basically the Wade Phillips defense, which is send everybody that you can at the quarterback and put your DBs on an island one-on-one and hope that the pressure gets there before the quarterback gets the ball off to the open guy. So, and a lot of times that works, puts you behind the chains, but occasionally you get big plays scored against you. Vic Fangio's defense philosophically is almost a 180 degree opposite philosophy. Vic Fangio wants to send the least amount of people at the quarterback he needs to get pressure and drop everybody else back in a zone and try to pick you off. And so it took a little while for this defense to kind of understand that, you've got to stay in your zone. You got to stay with your guy because the pressure isn't going to get there as quickly. And there were people that were saying that Von Miller had fallen off because his sack totals weren't as high, but that's a natural function of how this defense works. So in terms of things that I think he needs to improve, I think I'd like to see him dial up a blitz or two with the game on the line. There were several times when the Broncos were beaten late in games because they allowed quarterbacks to step up and make a throw and get them in position for a field goal. The Bears game stands to mind to me as the most obvious example of this because I was literally standing under the field goal post watching this meltdown happen. And, the pass rush didn't get there. Mitch Trubisky, of all people, completes 2 passes and gets them in range for a field goal, and then they win that game. A game the Broncos should have won. So, as you pointed out earlier. So I'd like to see end of game situations, him, consider blitzing a little bit more. But other than that, I think he's a pretty aggressive, offensively minded coach for being a defensive background coach.
Yeah, great point. I remember one of the press conferences, I believe he said something about one of the assistants on the in the box told him, I think the Broncos were tied, and like the assistant told him like, let's just play it conservatively and go to overtime. But Vic Fangio said, no, let's be aggressive. Let's try chucking something down the field and trying to get a PI call. And that's indeed what happened. They got a PI call and kicked the field goal to win the game. So, but I want to turn over to Steven. He's got a question for you about Drew Lock as the starting quarterback of the Broncos.
Yeah, and Ben, I thought it was a fantastic point to talk about kind of the difference and the shift in the Broncos defense from a rush-heavy defense to a zone-heavy defense. We'll see how that turns out long-term for Fangio and his defense. But I want to move on to the Broncos offense, and that is Drew Lock. We covered a little bit of him in the beginning. But the first thing I want to ask is Drew Lock the franchise guy in Denver? And if so, how high do you see his ceiling?
I think that he is. We'll see. Prior to him being drafted in Denver, I thought he was going to be a franchise quarterback. Then he got drafted here, and so I was like, "Woo! I get to cover this guy now."
Nice.
But it was, I think he can be. There are some things that he needs to improve, specifically mechanically, but I don't think the moment or the game is too big for him. He's a guy that he's just relaxed, and he makes you want to play for him. Like it was weird because Joe Flacco was kind of aloof guy, and you could see the dynamic shift when Drew Lock got in there. I was down on the field the end of that Chargers game, which by the way was the game they threw the ball up at the end and got the pass interference and won. It was Drew Lock's first start against the Chargers, and it was interesting to watch the guys. The way that they reacted to Joe Flacco and the way they acted to Drew Lock was totally different. Like these guys were pumped. And they were going up, and there's high-fiving Drew Lock, picking him up, carrying him around. He's just a guy that you get motivated to play for. Heck, I wanted to strap on the pads and get out there, but it was, it's one of those things that it's so rare to find a personality like that just, makes you want to get out there and go play for a guy. And so I think he can. If he can clean up the mechanics, he's got some really bad footwork stuff he falls into at times. He needs to clean up, but he's got all the tools. He's more athletic than people think he is. He's got a big arm, and the game's not too fast for him. So, I think the sky's the limit if he can clean up those mechanical issues.
Yeah, I think you put it really well there. I think this is a guy who has an opportunity to be a special talent and a special quarterback within the NFL. It's going to depend on the pieces around him. It's going to depend on how he develops. But, the fundamentals are there. I think he's a great team locker room guy, a great leader. And, it's pretty funny to see his parody rap video being put out there.
Yeah, I'm trying to put something together for Christmas, like a karaoke event where we can get Drew Lock to come out there and rap, for charity. So we'll see if I can make that happen.
Hey, if you set that up, I might just drive Isaiah, John, and I over there to go join and witness the birth of a music legend. But it's so great that he keeps things fun for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Definitely does.
Let's go over to Isaiah for some positional breakdowns.
Yeah, and before I get into that, I also want to jump in on what Ben said about Drew Lock providing that energy for the Broncos. I liken it to what happened when the 49ers got Jimmy Garoppolo in that midseason trade, and they started him for the final 6 games of the season. The 49ers before that, they had no energy whatsoever. You didn't really see people high-fiving. You only everybody was really depressed because they were losing a bunch of games. But when Jimmy Garoppolo got in there, you could just sense the immediate energy that he brought to the team. They started winning. Players started dancing in the locker room after the games. Players started high-fiving each other and hugging each other and stuff. It was just so much fun. I really believe that Drew Lock, that final 5 games that he played, will be a lightning rod to this upcoming season. But Ben, as training camp nears, what are some positions of strength and some positions of weaknesses that the Bronco fans should be watching for?
Well, the tight end room is stacked. In fact, they're going to have to cut somebody. They've got too many. You've got Noah Fant. They added Nick Vannett. They drafted Albert Okwuegbunam. So that means that Jeff Hireman, Jake Butt, Troy Fumagalli, Austin Ford, those guys are all probably gone. The wide receiver room, I think, is obvious after the draft picks. A lot of people don't realize the Broncos actually drafted 3 receivers, not 2. They drafted Hamler and Judy early, but they also got Tyree Cleveland, a big deep threat out of Florida, late on day 3. Add him to a roster that already includes Cortland Sutton, who had a breakout year last year, Tim Patrick, who might be one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. and a smattering of other guys. Juwan Winfrey, who played well last year before getting dinged up in preseason. Deshaun Hamilton, who I don't know that he's going to make this team. He regressed last year, but there was a lot of potential in year one. And Deontay Spencer, the all-pro kick returner, who's got some ability to play receiver as well. Kind of, you see him as a fly sweep, jet sweep kind of guy. So I think on the offensive side, those are the strengths. Running back, I think that's pretty obvious. If you got Melvin Gordon and Phil Lindsay, that's pretty obviously a strength. Question marks on the offensive line, but there are the interior of it looks solid anyway, with Lloyd Cushenberry, Glenn Glasgow, and Dalton Reisner starting. It's the tackle positions that are a giant question mark. Jawan James on the right side is unreliable. Garrett Bowles on the left side is holding it down. Literally, they just threw another flag for him holding. So it's one of those things where those two are the question marks. On the defensive side of the ball, a lot of depth on the D-line. The outside linebacker position has strength at the top and depth. The inside linebacker position is a question mark. You got Alexander Johnson, who had a breakout year. Todd Davis is really a downhill-only linebacker, and everybody after that is just a guy. Josie Jewell got roasted by a fullback in the Green Bay game. That was embarrassing. Joe Jones is a special teamer. They just don't have much depth there. Corner, I think, is the biggest question mark on this team. You got Bouye, but you don't know if he's going to return to form. Bryce Callahan, I talked to him the other day, saw him. He's fully healthy, but he's never been healthy for a whole season, so who knows? And then after that, it really starts to get scary. You got a rookie in Michael Ojemudia. You got Devontae Bosby from the AAF, who played well until he got hurt last year. Devontae Harris, Duke Dawson. So there's just a lot of question marks there. And then safety is a strength. You've got Kareem Jackson, who played lights out, and Justin Simmons, who was an all-pro. So that's the roster breakdown.
Yeah, good points, Ben. The guy that I want to ask you, a guy that you mentioned when you were breaking down the Denver Broncos, and that is Bryce Callahan. And I'm pretty sure a lot of Bronco fans want to know about his status. He was supposed to be an integral part of the Denver defense last season before he got hurt. What's the status of Bryce Callahan, and do you think he will be ready for training camp?
Yes, the status is 100% healthy. He will be ready for training camp. I did see him last week. What's today? Well, it would have been this past week. I saw him earlier this past week, and he's 100% ready to go.
Oh, that's great news. For all the Bronco fans that are listening, we got breaking news. Bryce Callahan will be 100% ready to go for the start of training camp. That should be great news for Vic Fangio and all the Bronco fans out there. But Steven has a question about the a home field environment now that there probably won't be any fans this year in the stadiums.
Yeah, Ben, and I wanted to ask because we know that there won't be fans in the stadiums this year. So which team in that type of a situation where there won't be live fans in the stadium do you think is best equipped to handle the season and go out there and win the games?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I'll say this, though. Denver might be the only team that still has a home field advantage without fans because they've got altitude, and a lot of people don't have that, specifically early on where you're going to have a training camp that's shortened and guys aren't used to being as gassed as they are. Home games in Denver in the first month of the season, maybe on into the second month of the season, are going to be very difficult for visitors. So, I would say that the Broncos have an advantage in that regard over the entire NFL. Other than that, man, teams that are very offensive oriented, I think, are probably going to be better because they're not going to have a crowd visiting, crowds in their ears, messing with their communication. They're going to be able to do more things. And if you're a team that likes to play at tempo, if you're a team that likes to no huddle, oftentimes if it's really a loud environment, your signals and your communication can get interrupted. That won't be a case here. So I think if you're a tempo team, if you're an offensive oriented team, you pick up a little bit of an advantage. But other than that, I can't think of any advantages that anybody's going to have here.
Yeah, I do think that there's still a certain travel advantage to it. For example, if you're like a team from the West Coast and you're traveling to Lambeau Field, for instance, right? It's not going to have the same altitude that Mile High Stadium is. You're not going to have the same physical advantage, but you're still going to have the cold weather. And I think just the act of traveling alone. I know that these guys are professionals. They've played the game for a while at the college and professional level, but I think there is something to be said about travel fatigue, going from one end of the country to the next end of the country, going to practice there, and then playing the game away from home. Just that, and you exclude the fans out of it, I still think it's an advantage.
Yes, statistically speaking, teams that go from the West Coast to the East Coast have the biggest problem.
Yep.
Usually because your circadian rhythm is thrown off and you're playing at a significantly earlier time than your body's used to, and you're not fully woken up. So there may be some elements of that involved with the schedule, but I think that's a good point.
So maybe this could be the year, though, that the Denver Broncos really make some noise in the West because, as you mentioned, they're the only one with the true complete home field advantage. You got the
Feels like it.
travel. Yeah, you got the travel. You got the altitude. It's going to be interesting. Isaiah, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Ben about, I think the biggest issue I could see this year with no fans is normally with fans, the coaches, when they're calling plays, they put that play sheet over their mouth so the opposing team cannot hear what like the plays are being called. I think right with no fans, that's gonna make it even more difficult for the coaches to call plays because even if you put that play sheet over your mouth, the opposing team can still hear what you're calling. So, what do you think the coaches are gonna do this year, Ben, to avoid having other teams like steal their play calls?
I think you'll be business as usual as far as that goes. I will tell you there was some guy out there that was claiming that they were intercepting radio signals and relaying them a couple of years ago, but I don't think that's a thing. To be honest with you, they won't have to shout the play calls out because there's going to be no fans in the stands. So I think it's just a natural counterbalance. You're going to have them being quieter and that covering up their faces, and that'll keep the signals from getting out. In any event, there's only 10 ways to throw a football and 9 ways to run it. It's just mixing it up. So stealing signals, I don't know that that's the largest advantage in the world. If you know a play is coming, that's one thing. But, most of this stuff, you get on tape, you can see what they're going to do and what they do situationally anyway. So I don't think it's that big a deal.
All right, let's move on to NFL divisions. Question for you, Ben. Which division do you see being the most competitive in the AFC?
In the AFC, man, I think they all have competition. I think the West has 2 teams, and the North probably. I think Cleveland's going to be better than people think they are. I thought they're a good football team. They just had lousy coaching last year, offensive and defensive side of the ball. They've got the players. I think they're going to be better than people think. The Steelers are better than people think. The Bengals are better than people think, even though they finished with the number 1 overall pick. There's more talent on that roster than people think there is. And the Ravens, of course, everybody saw what they did. So I would say that the North's probably the most competitive. You're going to have some interesting teams. I like the way Miami was scratching and clawing at the end of the season last year. I think Brian Flores is a
I love
coach.
that too.
We'll see how he's able to do. I think Buffalo's a legit football team. I said it last year. If Josh Allen ever gets consistent, they're a Super Bowl contender because that defense is ridiculous. The Jets, I'm not an Adam Gase guy, but they've got a lot of talent, so we'll see. And now they've got all the draft picks in the world, so that's going to be interesting. The Patriots are still the Patriots. Even without Tom Brady, they're still the Patriots. So we'll see how that shakes out. I think that'll be a fun division as well.
Yeah, that will definitely shape out to be a good one. But I do love your pick with the North because what I feel about the Browns is that it was really a team that they got a lot of high ego guys. Yeah, they're very talented, but they had a lot of high ego guys come into the team all at once. And like Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham, of course, they drafted Mayfield. And this is like a franchise that is not used to being a playoff contender year after year. This was really their first time launching themselves back into that playoff conversation for the first time in really maybe 1 decade. And so I think a little bit of just the pressure and the nerves got to them, as well as just integrating the different personalities into that locker room. But if I had to say, I'd say the North too.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I said this last year. I'm a big, I enjoy watching the Browns. I'm a big Baker fan, but I said this last year. I said before the season, I was like, I look for the Browns to regress. Everybody, they're the darling pick, but you don't have any experience. You've got a bunch of big outsized personalities, but it's all young and you've got no experience. And then to top that off, you get to the coaching staff and you got a lack of experience there too. The most experience they had was their defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks, who was a failure as a head coach. And then you've got Freddie Kitchens, who was woefully out of his depth, thrust from running backs coach all the way up there to quarterbacks coach to OC, to head coach. So, that implosion last year for me felt easy to see. I think they'll be better this year because I think Stefanski is a much better coach.
Yeah, I think so as well. And you don't have to tell me twice about Stefanski, man. I really enjoyed him in Minnesota. I'm a diehard Vikings fan. Tough to see us lose our offensive coordinator over to the AFC and our best wide receiver in Stephon Diggs over to Buffalo. So we'll see how we adjust. All right, I want to hand it over to Jonathan, who has a question about the Seahawks and the recent acquisition that happened just today.
Hi, Benjamin. Jonathan here. The top story today in the NFL, as we all know by now, is the New York Jets trading their premier safety to the Seattle Seahawks. I think Adams is a top 5 safety in the NFL. I think he's one of the best at his craft. He's definitely ranks up there with the best. What do you think he will bring to that Seahawks secondary?
Well, you bring a sure tackler, and you bring a guy that's as good going towards the ball as he is away from it. I thought Seattle paid way too much, but I like the player. I agree with you. He's a top 5, top 6 safety in the league. And he's got great ball skills as well as being a willing tackler and a willing hitter. So he's not just a one high zone safety, but in the cover 3 scheme that they like to run there in Seattle, they want hitters on top of all that. So, I think he's a good fit for what they want to do. For me, it's just interesting because they've spent a lot of picks on safeties, trying to acquire safeties ever since they didn't want to pay Earl Thomas. And then they spent more picks acquiring Adams, and they're going to have to pay him the money that they would have had to pay Earl Thomas to begin with. So I think there's a lesson to be learned in terms of front offices about paying your own guys. But at the end of the day, they got younger. And we'll see. I think he's a great fit. I think they paid too much, but I think he's a great player.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. Pete Carroll always seems to know what direction he's going in. He always seems to make the right moves to make his team younger, make his team better, make his team faster. And I think it's a good pickup for that secondary. We've seen great things out of that secondary in the past with prior players in the past and everything. I think this is a great pickup for the Seattle Seahawks, definitely. Another question that I have for you is it regards the Rams. The Rams, they regressed last season. Jared Goff didn't have his best season a year ago. Todd Gurley's no longer with the team. He got traded. He didn't get traded. He got released, excuse me. He's with the Atlanta Falcons now. So it's a new look for the Rams. And the Rams relied on him heavily in their offense. The Rams got a tough schedule to open things up. They got the Cowboys. They got the Eagles. They got the Buffalo Bills on the road, which will be a tough place to play. What do you see the Rams doing this season?
Well, I think a lot of that depends on Sean McVay's ability to innovate. The problem is the key that runs that offense, which is the cutback run off wide zone. That's where it all starts for the Rams. Vic Fangio, of all people, was the one who figured out how to defend it 2 years ago. If you go back and look at that Bears game and how they lined up 5-6 guys straight out along the line of scrimmage and strung the play out, it's the same defensive philosophy that Bill Belichick then copied in the Super Bowl to beat the Rams. And so I think that the problem there was that Sean McVay's play got figured out, and he never adjusted. Like we went into the season and it didn't change. It was the same thing, and everybody knew how to defend it now. It's tough once the blueprint is out. It's tough to do, but you've got to be able to adjust. And so if Sean McVay is able to, with that eidetic memory, is able to take that, apply those lessons, and start to amplify his audience and his offense and add more to it, then I think they'll be a lot better off. It didn't help that the knee injuries to Gurley, and the arthritic knees, and slowed him down a little bit on top of it. But you've got to have that run game. It's the element that makes that offense go, because then those deep play action plays become available, and Goff needs that play action because he's not quick enough with his eyes to be able to create those yet. So, I think the Rams can be good. You're in a tough division. I think it's interesting. We talked in the last question about Jamal Adams and the addition to the Seahawks. Look at all the teams that like to throw vertically in that division. You know, you got a strong ground game that likes the deep PA crossers in both the Rams and the Niners. And oh, by the way, you got the air raid over there in Arizona. So having safeties that can cover back there, you know, you kind of need those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of the NFC West, let's head over to another team in the NFC West. And Jonathan mentioned the Rams, and we've seen teams like the Rams have Super Bowl hangovers. And you mentioned the play action and run heavy teams. The Niners ran a lot of runs up the gut. They ran a lot of play action, just like the Rams did. So do you see them having a similar Super Bowl hangover that the Rams had?
You know, I don't know. I think the Niners are in a unique position versus some of these other teams that have had that hangover. You know, the Niners are pretty innovative with what they do. They've got a strong speed run game, rotational backs, not a lot of attrition on the team, and a very deep defensive line and defensive front seven. So I don't know that they're in for the biggest hangover. They're not a team that relied on any one particular thing to get them there. They're just good. The key for the Niners is really going to be the play of Jimmy Garoppolo. Can Jimmy Garoppolo stop turning the ball over? Can he be a guy that when there's a deficit, he can put the team on his back and make throws? And we saw at times during the playoffs that they were trying to kind of hide him a little bit because they weren't confident he could make some of those throws. So, you know, the Niners are a very good team. Love Kyle Shanahan, big fan. You know, he's here all the time in town in Denver, talk to his dad, and, you know, we get to see him quite a bit. But, you know, he's starting to get that reputation about big games, and I hope that doesn't follow him. I hope he's able to get one.
Hey, you know, in my opinion, I think Shanahan did a great job of coaching both the Niners and the Falcons. And it might be a little bit of a hot take here, but I think he put both teams in the position. You go to that Super Bowl in February 2017, Matt Ryan had the look to win the game. Offensive line couldn't block. They had a wide open receiver to help him go up by 2 possessions late in the game, or 3 possessions. It was pretty crazy. And then in the Niners-Chiefs game, he really helped release that space in the secondary with that play action, Jimmy G, and he just missed Emmanuel Sanders on that deep route. If they hit that, we're having a completely different discussion here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I just feel like that Kyle, and it's weird because most of the people talk about people getting a case of the tight cheeks and getting too conservative in those games. I feel like Kyle Shanahan got too aggressive in those games. If Matt Ryan had just taken 3 kneel downs and kicked the field goal, the New England Patriots don't come back. Instead of that, you know, that situation where they work themselves out of scoring position there in the third quarter, the start of the rally, and kind of the same thing. If they go with the run game and they continue to eat the clock and they continue to push the ball forward little chunks at a time instead of trying to take that deep shot, you know, who knows? Maybe they play the ball control game. They come away with the W. I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but it just feels like he gets a little too aggressive in those games where he could get to the point and realize that the clock is the enemy at that point and not the opposing defense.
Hey, and I chalk it up to this, man. The winners write the history. And right now, there's a lot of people out there that are doubting the Niners. And they're right for now, but we will see, you know, coming over the next couple seasons, what they can do within the NFC. So I want to leave it off with preliminarily Super Bowl predictions. Who do you see coming out of the NFC, AFC, and who do you see winning that?
Oh, it's tough. You know, on the AFC side, I'd be hard-pressed to bet against Kansas City. That team is stacked top to bottom.
Good choice.
And Pat Mahomes is just an all-world player. I mean, anytime he's on the field, you got a chance. It makes everybody around him better. So I'm gonna say Kansas City on the AFC side. On the NFC side, man, I like the Saints. They've had 2 bad years, 2 bad outs, I guess, the last couple of years. They've come so close. I think this is probably Drew Brees' last year. There's going to be extra motivation for some of those guys, and they've got a heck of a squad. So give me the Saints on the NFC side.
That is going to be an intriguing Super Bowl. You got
Saints
2
and Chiefs.
explosive offenses, Saints and Chiefs. I'm looking forward to that. Can we please make that our Super Bowl if the Vikings don't make it? That's all I'm saying here. But, you know, it's been a joy having you, Ben. And I want to leave it over to Jonathan, Isaiah. Any final thoughts, guys?
No, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
It was a pleasure to have you on, Benjamin. You really know your stuff. Excellent work out there in the Mile High City. Hope to have you back soon. Thanks.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.
Night to do this.
Yes. Yeah, I got to second Jonathan's comments. It was a pleasure having you on. And, you know, hopefully the Broncos defy the odds and make it to the Super Bowl with my Niners, because Kyle Shanahan and Vic Fangio are two of my most favorite coaches. So it would be a blast to see Denver on one side against San Francisco. That would be my dream Super Bowl. But yeah, and also, Ben, good luck to your Nuggets as the NBA resumes.
Well, good luck to my wallet on the Nuggets. We'll see if that little throwing a little money down on that yields us any results. How about that?
Hey, it's a crazy season. I believe it. Maybe someone out there, Kawhi Leonard or Paul George, will get COVID.
Well, I'm not wishing it on anybody, but I'm not going to be mad.
Yeah, not wishing anything.
Please knock out the Clippers, though, for my Lakers. Please knock out the Clippers.
Yes.
All right. Well, once again, Ben, it was a pleasure to have you on board. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, stay safe out there and have a great weekend.
Yeah, you guys as well. At any time, I'm happy to come on anytime.
All right, guys. With that being said, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This is Quarantine Chats, episode 53, part of the MI6 Sports Network. Be sure to follow Ben on KOA Sports Radio, the official radio for the Denver Broncos. You can follow Jonathan Mathis on the Stables Network and check out some of our other content in the links down below. Thank you, guys. Good night.